everybody. I am with what I would call one of the best friends I've ever had in the movement industry, and someone who I've gotten to become very, very close with over the past decade plus. And his name's Gary Gray, and you probably don't need much of an introduction, Gary, because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, and that's a good thing. And I'm just an honor to have you here, an honor to be on the Gymnazo podcast, and really excited to dive in because I love chatting with you. I love hearing your stories. I love being around you, and this is the time I get to be kind of one-on-one with you. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
It's an honor. That was by far the best introduction I've ever had because you introduced me as your friend. So that's what I want to be known for, and so I appreciate that. I think we're going to have some fun just sharing together as we always do. It just seems that you and I, anytime we get together, you just bring a big grin to my face and to my heart. So I appreciate the opportunity to share together.
I appreciate that too. Well, thank you. So we met, I know the story well, 2009. It was November 2009. And I just got done talking to Lisa Huck, if you remember her. Mm. And I saw her in my training gym at that time, a big box gym, just doing essentially the spherical warm-up, if I could say it so simply. At that point. And it looked very well in that atmosphere with Treadmill Alley and the mirrors and the dumbbells and the Smith's machine squat rack. It looked way out of place. But it looked way out of place. And I just kind of brushed it off like there's another, I'm not going to call it weirdo, but that's probably in my brain what I was thinking about.
Sure, being honest.
Yeah, I'm going to go train my clients and, make sure their biceps look good and make sure they got, good form and knees over the toes.
Right.
But I remember talking to a power lifter, like our token power lifter at that spot. His name was Joe. I said, who is that? Who is that lady over there? He's like, oh, that's my trainer in a sense. It's like, you have a trainer? It's like, well, I have a trainer who helps me kind of ungunk my SI joint. And in my head, I was thinking, what trainer knows how to do that? Mm-hmm. I was like, that's reserved. That's a reserved. I got to go spend $100,000, 3 years, move out of this place, go get a PT degree.
Right.
Oh yeah. She takes care of me every time. And so that was my trigger to go meet her, talk with her, and then she said, you got to go meet Gary Gray. You got to go meet Dave Tiberio. You got to go to this conference called Chain Reaction. And that was probably in September. So I signed up, and there I was in San Diego, just as green as could be. And anyways, met you, and after the end of day one, at the half point of day one, I ended up leaving, going to lunch, calling my mentor at the time saying, I got it. This is my vehicle. This is my process. So to me, I had to start there because that, for me as a trainer who didn't get into PT school 8 different times, essentially, after 2 different years, and didn't want to give up, I had this answer, and you provided it for me. So a lot of work. No questions asked on that one, but it was a really, really interesting point.
So I didn't know that. I knew part of that story, but I didn't know the significance of that story. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, you got it. So I want to know your story. How did you develop or come up with the Gray Institute? What was your passion, your reasoning? Did it just fall into place, or was it something you were very intentional about from the beginning?
I've been asked that a number of times, and I'm not sure I even answer it the same way each time because I kind of come at it from a different angle. I was blessed in 7th grade to know 2 things: that I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I wanted to marry this girl. So very few 7th graders know those 2 things in life, So who are you going to marry and what are you going to be when you grow up? And I could have told you in 7th grade, and as you know the rest of the story, I was blessed to become a physical therapist as well as a personal trainer and strength coach and an athletic trainer. We'll talk about that later. But more importantly, I got to marry that girl. And back in my day, and you'll hear that a lot, I just never thought I'd be an old guy that would say that. Being around old people and hearing them say that, I just used to shake my head and going, oh boy, here we go. Another back in my day story. And, but back in my day, to get into physical therapy school was extremely easy if you were a male. So your grade point had to be 2.0 or better. I'm not sure I made that. I think I was in the 1.9 range, which I thought was good. That's, my mom and dad always taught me that, at least you're trying to be average, Gary. And so I was just a pinch below average. I didn't think that was that bad. But at that time, they were encouraging schools to get males through the door because at that time it was a very female dominant profession. So to get it, my very first school, I just went to 2 years of college and applied, and they called me up, didn't even ask for an interview. They wanted to know if I had a pulse, if I really was a guy, and would I consider trying to get my grade point average up. And I said, sure. And they said, well, you're in. And so my third year of college, I went to PT school. And back then, all you had to do is get a bachelor's degree. So 2 years later, you get spit out, take the state board, and you're a physical therapist. But I was smart enough to know how dumb I was and what I didn't know. And I can remember vividly my first job and going home. This was 3 months before I got married to this little apartment and crying, realizing I had just let a lot of people down. Probably even more significant, I felt that I let myself down because I didn't know what I was doing. I checked the boxes in PT school, but they didn't teach me how to think. They didn't teach me how to understand what that total knee or total hip person really did. They didn't really tell me about the sacroiliac joint. They told me there was one there, but they didn't tell me how, with like a power lifter, it would get irritated. And I panicked. I just, I didn't know what to do. So it was subconsciously conscious saying that either I'm going to leave this field because I just don't want to come home and cry every night, or I'm going to have to take it upon myself to educate myself. And that started a long, long journey of educating and learning from people like yourself and just learning, which I hopefully still do even at this day. So it was a little bit purposeful, but a lot of it just kind of fell into place as I started putting the pieces together.
How far into your career would you say that this concept happened?
It happened quickly because my very first job was in a place called Adrian, Michigan. And as I look out the windows here, I'm in a place called Adrian, Michigan. So I'm still here, literally 45 years later. And I was literally conned into being the director of a physical therapy department that saw about 100 and X amount of patients, 120 some days, 150. And my particular first day, what they did tell me is the other therapists had quit. I'm not sure if they at least, I think they quit before they knew I was coming. So I was the chief physical therapist in a huge inpatient and outpatient clinic that saw everything, neurological patients, orthopedic patients, everything. And I can vividly remember within the first month, I had a really kind hospital administrator. His name was Wally Stewart, and he's just a sweetheart of a man. And he came down and would always ask how it's going, and I would say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but so I hired a few more. I had hired some therapists. That was kind of neat to be able to hire my own therapist. I was in charge of occupational therapy as well as speech therapy. But he asked this interesting question. He goes, have you approved the budget? And I looked at him, I said, sir, I don't know what a budget is. He goes, well, I kind of figured that. He goes, what happens is every year we have to decide what we're going to buy for each department. And then each department head submits what they want. And therefore, before the other three therapists left, they already outlined their budget. They got it approved by the board, but you have to do final approval so you can order it. So you just have to sign it, and we order all the stuff. I go, that sounds pretty good. He goes, so do you know where the budget is? I go, no, sir, I don't know. So he looks in the file cabinet. He goes, well, it's probably under B. I go, that makes a lot of sense to me. Sure enough, there it was, budget. And he pulled it out, and he says, so here's a budget. He's really kind, trying to explain to me. But I quickly noticed a line item, and it said Cybex, and next to it said $40,000. And I looked at him and I said, "You're going to buy that?" And he goes, "Yeah, oh yeah." He says, "The three therapists that were here, they got in front of the board. They presented why they need it, why we can't even be a sports medicine clinic without having it, and why it's the state of the art." And I looked at him and I go, um, "Respectfully, sir, if you buy it, I'm not going to use it." And he goes, "What?" You know, and I said, "I'm not sure if I can explain it in detail to you, but I won't use it. It's something I don't believe in." He goes, "Well, how can you not believe in it?" And I go, "That's probably a pretty good question, but it doesn't make sense to me sitting on a table making your leg go back and forth, especially for $40,000, and especially at the same speed." So I started to even articulate back then kind of what we now know as kind of the functional movement spectrum. And he goes, "Well, shoot, you just saved us $40,000." And I go, "Well,
Just that
but
easy.
I'd like to know if I could change that and move some money down here into the continuing education budget." And he goes, "Well, yeah." He says, "Right now there's $1,000 there. How much do you want?" I said, "I want $40,000." And he goes, "Well, all the finances have been approved. I guess it doesn't matter if we buy a Cybex or we use it." And I go, "Done."
Yeah.
And so he approved that.
Yeah.
And I worked my tail off the next 2, 3, 4 years trying to go to every seminar I could get into. I do have to admit that on a few of them I lied, um, because they wouldn't allow, if you weren't a chiropractor, they wouldn't allow non-chiropractors in. But as long as I put Dr. Gary Gray and dash chiropractor and set my money in, it seemed to work pretty good. Podiatrists were the same way. They were very protective of orthotics back then. And so unless you were a podiatrist, you didn't get to go learn more about the foot. And I knew nothing about the foot. So I put Dr. Gary Gray. Some of the osteopaths in our area were very well known. Same thing, you know, unless you were osteopathic medicine physician, you didn't get through the door. But strange enough, if you wrote down Dr. Gary Gray and sent your check in, they'd let you sneak in. So I went I went everywhere, and I was fascinated by how many smart people were out there. I mean, I was first of all intimidated, but then like, wow. But it became very obvious to me very early on is that very few people were connecting the dots.
Mm.
Foot specialists, podiatrists didn't even know what a knee did, and in my mind's eye, it was connected by a tibia, and you should probably know what the foot does relative to the knee. It just made sense because when the knee moved, the foot moved. When the foot moved, the knee moved. And so you're only getting part of the story. You only had one half of the coin, so to speak. So that was the start. Looking at all that and realizing that it'd be kind of fun if somebody put this together. You know, kind of connected the dots and brought all these people together and trying to understand. At the same time, I became a certified athletic trainer. I got my strength coach certification. Again, you have to remember back then it was very easy. Not as many hours, not as many. And then I took a couple personal training classes on. You couldn't do anything online because there's no such thing as online back then.
Right.
So you just went to a seminar on a weekend, and they called it a personal training degree. And as long as you didn't kill anybody, you were good to go. And I started getting embarrassed, thinking maybe I missed this in school. Maybe I'm just stupid and I didn't listen very well. But as I started talking to a lot of other therapists and trainers and athletic trainers and strength coaches, they didn't get it either. They didn't know how the body really worked, how it was connected. So that's a long way to tell you how the journey started.
Is it all that you hoped for? Or is the outcome right now? Take away the pandemic, but is the outcome where you thought it would be, or is it way beyond, or is it you still got 2 decades left where you got to push?
Let's start with the first question. Is it all that I hope for? It's more than what I hope for. And this is going to sound dorky, but you got to understand I'm an old guy.
Well,
because of that,
go for it.
because of that, I got to meet you. And when I reflect back on having the privilege of getting in front of people and sharing, and the people that I have met and become friends with and admire, if you would have asked me back then, do you ever believe you're going to have this many cool friends? I'd go, nobody has this many cool friends. I mean, that's impossible. I don't know how anybody would do that. And so it's, in a very significant way, it's been more than I ever dreamed because of who I've been able to share my life with. So I've been more than I could ever hope for.
That's awesome. Well, I can certainly say I appreciate it because it's changed my life and the entire lives of my team, and now the entire lives and business lives of those who we are sharing and educating to. So it's a really cool, cool is the lackluster word. It's a profoundly transformational process that you've started, and I know you've had a lot of partners and help and influences along the way, and all that convergence is changing a big deal. So
and that's why I believe it's such a blessing. Just as when you do get a little older, you realize that statistics would say I'm not going to live as another 67 years. So most data would confirm that. So that's what you call evidence-based scientific proof. And so you kind of you have a sense for looking backwards a little more. You still try to move forward, but you look backwards. But man, when you look backwards and you see, friends like yourself and just the times we've been together and the joy we've had and just little things like that, you go, wow, this has been a pretty cool deal. So it's any friendship like that really turns out to be a mutual blessing.
I appreciate that. Yeah. You were describing something that I had to tap onto because we were talking about it pre this show, in a sense, is that, you went and studied a lot of things. Essentially, what I would say is you became a specialist of many specialties. And that's what I think that we are as a training group, is there's a lot of great stuff out there, a lot of good mindsets. Some of them are literally indicating of each other, but that doesn't necessarily make them wrong or right. It's just an approach. But it all comes down to a foundation. And that foundation of AFS, or applied functional science, is something that you've packaged and really kind of put out there for some people to really dive their teeth into. And we call it being functional. And it's just simply that. And the World Functional Training right now is, well, it's kind of a basket case of a phrase. What does it mean to you, though? What does it mean to you that, for someone who would say, gosh, functional training, functional physical therapeutics, et cetera, it kind of came from you guys from at least a popularity standpoint. What does it mean to you?
We're the ones that I think helped mess it up. When I look back on, because when we would compare traditionally what I was taught to do versus what I thought functionally you should do, we of course started throwing out the phrase, well, this is going to be functional therapy, this will be functional rehab, this will be functional training, this will be functional performance. And I don't think we really knew what we were talking about. We just knew it was a little bit different and it looked a little more like the function. Your phrase that you shared with me, though, I think is a brilliant phrase, being a specialist of specialties, because function is context dependent. And therefore, what's functional, this morning I swam. So if you said, hey, let me see your training program, I'd say, well, hopefully I'm a specialist of this specialty of swimming because I train a lot of swimmers. So I need to understand what the common denominator is for all of human movement. But then I have to be smart enough to say, and in the water with freestyle, what do I have to think about differently, and what do I create differently in order to allow that person to enjoy swimming more? So I love the concept that you shared with me early on, a specialist of specialties, because that's really what I think we need to try to be. And how do we determine those specialties? Well, that we listen to our client. They'll come in and they'll tell us, I want to be able to do this. And so immediately I go, well, is that my specialty? And if it's not, let's learn about it. Let's go back to the specialist part and look at the common denominator things. And then let's look where we have to go to say, okay, I think I can help you with that because your specialty is now my specialty. And so I love that phraseology. So I think what we got wrong for a number of years is just talking about functionally globally and realizing that you even global function, you have to identify and be somewhat of a specialist in understanding that. So we're trying to do a better job with that. We have come up with what we would call a way to assess. You know, we have a way to assess somebody globally, but then we always ask, then tell me what else, what you really want to do, and then we have to specialize that assessment to make it specific for that particular thingamabob. I need to pick boxes off the floor at the factory. I want to hit a golf ball further. I want to run faster. I want to be able to walk on the beach without my back hurting. I want to, so we go, okay, let's look at the, like you should say, the foundational, fundamental specialty of human movement. But now let's now apply it to what you just told me you would like my help with, and that becomes, I think, the one of the specialties that we engage in.
Yeah, I like that. What products are you guys offering, working on now that a trainer can say, "Gosh, I can really sink my teeth into that." Knowing that you're a physical therapist by license and trade, and a lot of people that go in there, I think they get this sense that, oh, you got to be a PT. But what are you doing right now for trainers to be like, you know what, I got this one. Thanks for letting me know about it.
Yeah, well, people like yourself who get into this field do it because they really have this heart to help people.
Sure.
Rarely, especially like in my day, like my first job, I made, I think it was, I'd say $7,200 a year, but I think it was 76. So I think I embellished the lowness. So we don't all of a sudden go, you know what, I'm going to dedicate myself to training people and rehabbing people so I get rich. You know, that was never, so I get rich was never part of the rest of the sentence. We all said that because we kind of took joy into helping people. We had this certain thing inside of us that when they seemed to get excited, we got excited. When they felt better, we felt better. When they moved better, we just thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So very early on, I realized that my specialty wouldn't be physical therapy. Physical therapy is a part of a spectrum, which simply means somebody wants to do something, but at this time, something hurts, or they need to have a surgery, or they just did have a surgery, or they have a neurological problem, or somehow their body was compromised where we need to understand hopefully what's going on so we can get them and restore back as much function as possible. But I also realized that personal trainers were doing that every day as well. They were just enhancing movement. And when I finally realized everything was movement, the common denominator is movement, the goal is movement, the assessment should be movement, the training should be movement, the rehab should be movement. I realized that, well, this is going to apply directly to those who dedicate themselves as a personal trainer. I watched, if they haven't done it yet, they need to go to the Gymnazo website and see the video you guys have up front. It's just only 3 minutes long, but it's a neat video. It's an emotional video, and it kind of explains this, I think, quite well. And, you know, just the passion that you all have of just allowing somebody to trust you to create an environment where you're enhancing their life. And so it applies to, you know, if your job is to enhance the movement of another individual, which that covers a lot of jobs, and certainly it covers the life of a personal trainer, then that's what Gray Institute has dedicated themselves towards, is allowing us all to understand it better so we can get people to move and experience life better.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing because from a training world, you know, when I went through it, 2010, and what I'm talking about, just for all the listeners, is called GIFT. And GIFT is a 40-week fellowship that it's immersive, I like to say. And the cool thing about it is you guys had the foresight to go digital, to go online well before the need was there.
Right.
It was a really powerful thing. I remember even I'm just beyond the point where I would have bought a VHS video of yours. I still remember those very, very well, but I didn't buy them from you. I actually got a CD, so I'm on the next tier. But I remember getting the functional video digest videos and getting those and diving into those. And then by the time I actually did, actually wanted a gift, it was still CD then. Now that's all digital in a sense.
Right.
File. Long story short. So to go through that and to go through 40 weeks, actually I went through it twice by definition because I did the graduate program for those kind of listeners. But that's another 40 weeks where it's more like it teaches you how to teach it. And I think that's the easiest that I could say it. So 80 weeks of time, mostly spending in front of a computer screen, learning, and 6 different trips because I did it twice. Moving in Adrian, Michigan, and it's a fun place because it's about the size of San Luis Obispo. So I felt very at home. I felt very at home. But it was a transformative time because it sitting there, I was sitting next to a guy, and if you're listening, John, out there, I hope you are, but I was sitting next to John Madonia, and we were the 2 youngest guys there. Actually, I was second youngest, he was third youngest, was one guy youngest. I was 25 at the time. I remember looking around and be like, what am I doing here? Because we had some amazing people talking about stuff that I literally had no idea what they were saying. I mean, literally.
Either did I, so.
Technology at all. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because I got to, what I love about what you do here is that you tell stories so well. And what I love about you a lot, and what I love about my wife a lot, is you embellish stories a lot too. And that is a good thing.
A pinch.
A pinch. But they're so believable. And I know a lot of them are true. In fact, I think there should be a Chronicles of Gary Gray sooner than later, in the sense, just of all the stories and experiences that you've done, from anything from, the one amazing story about you're in a high school gym and you tell the most nervous you've ever trained a single athlete. And I don't want to give the story away, but who that athlete was. That's an amazing story. All the way to going to San Diego. Not because of San Diego, but because of the military base that's in San Diego and up.
Right.
That's an amazing story. So that's another story of specialties and what those Navy sailors, in a sense, have to do to get proficient. So why I'm sharing this is that from a trainer standpoint, and what we're able to do is understanding the basic principles of human movement and how you've broken it down so simply, really, and I think that's the gift, is how simply we put it, and then knowing that it's just a complex web of craziness. To me, it's so amazing that the human body has this structure built underneath it, and the rules, in a sense, the principles, the truths with it. And how you can reverse engineer it. You just have to, it's quite possible. And we do it even as a trainer. And then a tip of the cap, how we've been able to take that information and fuel our ability to feed that to trainers in a more, I don't want to call it a simplified way, but in a more directed way. And I think what's going on is the ability for the training world to uplift itself, to fill that gap, or to get into the medical space, as I like to say it. Because to me, training and conditioning is the front lines of the entire medical system. It just doesn't have the credibility, in a sense. And I don't think it deserves it at this particular point, because there's a lot of, I don't want to call it, well, there's just a lot of stuff out there that really doesn't have a lot of principleness, doesn't have that rootedness to it. It's a lot of theory and feel, and well, here's a good idea, or maybe it has education and research behind it, but the research is flawed from the beginning because it's a scope of this small. So why I'm telling this whole thing is that you've been able to put a lot of great content out there for trainers to look into, from a movement assessments. And though you plugged my website, sneaky guy, I want to plug your website from the Gray Institute and go into that and to dive in there, because that's something that I think there's a harmony there, that someone who wants to dig in more and really get a lot of power and pop out of knowledge, you guys really have that. And I'm going to shamelessly plug ours too, with our multidimensional movement coach as well, because it's really taking it from a coaching standpoint or a training standpoint and in a facility standpoint. So it's a great marriage, and I really appreciate it. So
Well, we admire what you've done with your functional movement coach, because again, having the ability that you have of, you know, looking at everything and deciding what's the best for your client, that's really your job, but very few people have that ability. And then I think what stimulated you, and you'd have to, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, is the tremendous success that you guys have had and how you approach a client. You want to share with the world, and so that's why you know, I think we're so excited because of what you've done and what you're going to be able to do to help so many people. But you're just saying, hey, this works. It's really empowering for us and for the client, and therefore we have this way that we could share with you. Is definitely, if I was a personal trainer, I would look into first. Like you say, we have a lot of stuff that we can throw at you, but the way you put it together and took out some of the fat, I think is really critical for, especially if somebody wants to be really good at what they want to do really quick. I think following your pathway is good there. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, right on, right on. So as we navigate and we start pushing out there, you know, obviously to share, right? We call it open sourcing, right? We're going to open source what we've done and be as authentic about it as possible, be as real about it, because some stuff is pretty easy once you get it, and some stuff is really, really hard, and you really have to understand every single joint. And I remember we were sitting there listening from you. You said, you're going to have to know what every single joint does in the entire body, in all three planes of motion, in connection with every other joint in the body, and how it works in all three planes of motion.
For every specialty.
Yeah, and I looked at myself and said, man, you know, I barely got out of college, you know. And but because I barely got out of college, quote unquote, because I sat in the desk and listened to people talk to me, and I took notes, and I was tested on a multiple choice answer, and I realized that's not the way I learn. And the entire school system is designed to teach people a certain way, the way it is. But to get up and to feel it, to have a kinesthetic opportunity to learn and to stop that video and stop the lecture, get up and feel and move, it was a profound revelation that is not new. It's not new that people learn by doing, but to actually have an application base was a really big deal. So as we're sharing it, we're getting more people saying to us, like, what are you guys doing? Where's your science? Where's your data? And I have a very strong answer. It's called the empirical data, and we have it with our clients, all 400 of them outside there every single day. And I'm finding that in this space, you really can't have a case study on it, but you can certainly show a video before and after, and enough subjective data becomes objective over time. So I'm curious, is there any stories that you have, and this is a fun thing, I want to make this lighthearted, any stories that you've had to come through, and I know they're out there, but what I love about you is your stories of, I won't call them haters, but opportunities where you say, you know, it's an opportunity here for me to maybe share a different perspective, and is one that's more memorable to you?
Well, it's funny, we of course, the privilege I had was very early on, literally 44 years ago, being able to get up in front of a group of people and sharing. I remember the first time I shared about how I thought the knee functioned. And I remember saying that you can't learn to dance while sitting on your pants. And I shared with everybody who was using a knee machine at that time that I don't use a knee machine, but in fact, I ignore the knee. I like to use the hip and the foot. And there's two responses to that. One, tell me more, or you're crazy. Show me the proof. And some of it was like stunning. Like, so what kind of proof do you need if I show you a skeleton and I show you a femur, and at the top of the femur we call it the hip, and at the bottom of the femur we call it the knee? So do you need any more proof than that the two are connected? You know, it's like, sometimes it's like, come on, people, just, and what I found very early on is people who approach things like that, the quote unquote, we really haven't had any haters. I don't think anybody would say, well, we hate those guys. But we've had some people that have been critical. And as we get an opportunity to try to understand where they're coming from, the ones that are trying to defend their own ego, their own turf, their own education, their own whatever, just don't have the ability to set their teddy bear next to them and listen. Those who have been, I think, very successful say, just for a second, I'll listen to you, Gary. I'm going to put my teddy bear over here and go ahead and share with me and go from there. It quickly reminded me of a story where a few years ago I got an email from a young lady who was finishing her physical therapy degree. Of course, now they come out with a doctor of physical therapy. I'm not sure why that happened, but theoretically now we're doctors. And to get out of school, you have to, every school has a little different twist on this, but you have to do a doctoral thesis. And in this email, this young lady was very kind and said, Mr. Graham, I'm reaching out to you because I need your help. I've been assigned my doctoral thesis, and my doctoral thesis is this: prove all of Gray Institute theories to be false. That was the title of her doctoral thesis. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool, you know? So I wrote her back and I said, this is neat. I said, I think I need to talk to you a little more to understand how I could help you. Do you mind if we got on the phone? And she got right back. I mean, yeah, no, I can. You tell me when to. So we got online. I can't remember exactly. Usually that was either that day or the next day. And I said, you got to share with me a little more what's going on here. Well, I'm last year at this particular school, I'll be a doctor in physical therapy here in a few months, and I have to write this big paper. And my professor gave me this topic that I need to prove all the theories of Gray Institute to be false. So I have to do a lot of research and look at the science and everything that's out there and prove that what you guys are doing is basically wrong. I go, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, first of all, you need to thank that professor, because whoever it is, they're forcing you to think critically. I said, I like that. I like that approach. I'm not really sure I agree with the topic they gave you, but I said, I like the idea that they're trying to get you to think critically. And so I said, can I ask you a couple questions? And she goes, well, sure. I said, well, what do you know about it? She goes, absolutely nothing. I said, have you been on our website? Well, that's how I got your name. I went on and I called your secretary and they gave me your email, and that's how I got a hold of you. I said, have you studied anything that we have online? No. I go, okay. I said, the person who gave you this topic, is this a professor that you deal with, that you've been dealing with for the last years? Oh, yeah, very close. I said, is it a he or she? And it's a she, okay. Has she studied anything that we've done? No. In fact, I asked her that. She just knows that you guys teach a lot of the opposite of what we learn in physical therapy. So she wants to put an end to it. And she even thinks this paper might even be published. And I go, oh, well, that's even better, because now you're not just doing it for school to get out of school. You're going to, publish this paper and prove that my entire life's work has been worthless. So that's a pretty cool deal. I said, well, how can I help you?
That's good.
She goes, well, I need you to send me a list of your theories. And I go, well, I can do one better than that. I said, we have a bunch of online assets. I said, if I gave you an online asset that outlined what you might call our theories, would you be willing to take it and then get it back to me and then outline how I can help you? You would do that for me? I said, I'd love to. So that's right when we came out with 3D maps. So I said, great. I got a hold of my secretary. I said, please give this to this young lady as a gift. And I said, in the next, week or two, when you get done with this, let's talk again so I can see how I can help you, because my goal is to get you out of PT school, so you can. So she got back to me the next day. I can remember this vividly. And she goes, I'm done. I'm ready to talk. What she did is she stayed up all night and watched the 9.5 hours of 3D maps. Wow. Well, that's not true. She watched it twice. So from the time that we had talked on, let's pretend it's a Tuesday, to when we talk Wednesday afternoon, she watched 3D maps twice.
Wow.
And so now she's ready to talk. And so we got on the phone and I said, wow, that's impressive. She goes, well, I'm really, really upset. And I go, well, maybe I can help you. I apologize. Oh, no, I'm not upset at you. I'm upset at my schooling. I go, what do you mean? She goes, why didn't I learn this? It's so basic. It's so common sense. And he goes, and here's my biggest problem. You have no theories. I go, well, I was going to tell you that, but I thought it'd be easier if you kind of learned it. I said, we're not people who are smart have theories. They take a lot of facts and then they go, theoretically, if this is true, then this might be true. I said, we learned very early on, at least I did, that I ain't smart enough to come up with a theory. So what we did is we said, what's already out there that's been proven, such as gravity, such as three planes of motion, such as the body's a chain reaction, such as how the proprioceptors really work, such as how the muscles really function, such as, and so I went on and on, went kind of through the litmus test that she had just gone through twice. And she goes, yeah, so, but you can't argue anything you do. I go, well, that's because it's all fact-based. It's all truth-based. It's all, people call it research-based, So if you want to argue with Newton, be my guest, but Newton would say if you have this structure you call human body standing, and gravity's trying to suck it to the inside of the earth, and you think there's a muscle called a hamstring that bent the knee, you're crazed in the head. So gravity sucked it to the center of the earth. And so one of the things you might want to do is study how much gravity does to that human body and not mistake having a muscle do it. And she kind of laughed and she goes, well, we just took a test a few months ago and the question was, what's the function of the hamstring? And we better put down flex the knee. And I said, well, again, it's context dependent, but in most functional cases, when you're up and walking and running and kicking and dancing and stuff, the function of the hamstring is actually to extend the knee, opposite of what you learned, and to control rotation in what we call frontal plane motion. She goes, why didn't I learn this? She says, in one day I learned, and this is her quote, I learned more with a 9.5-hour course than I did in my entire physical therapy career. I go, well, that's first of all impossible. She goes, no, let me clarify it. Practical things I can use tomorrow. I go, okay, that's different. Because they made you memorize, the brachial plexus, for crying out loud. Why? I have no idea, because it's right here on a piece of paper, and you're never going to use it again. So she goes, well, I have a really big problem. It's just, but I have a better idea. I go, what's your idea? She says, I'm going to write a paper on the principles that Gray Institutes follows that's going to transform our profession. And I said, I think that's going to be a good paper. As you could imagine, she called me back the next day crying. I mean, it wasn't like uncontrollable crying, but she literally, you could tell she was upset. She goes, I talked to my professor and she won't allow me to do that. She goes, I gave you one job to do, and that's to prove what they teach is wrong, and you didn't do it, so you have to change it. So she says, now I have to come up with something new and different. And I said, okay, you remember when I told you how impressed I was with that professor? Yeah, I'd take it all back. I said, so you put you watched 19 hours of online stuff. You're excited about enhancing your profession, your ability to take care of a patient, your ability to follow evidence-based truth, your ability to have strategies that are going to be powerful for you and your classmates for the rest of your life, your ability, and your professor denies you that ability to do that. And she's the one who basically stuck you on us. I said, I would love to talk with her at some point and just share with her. I think she's taking a very brilliant mind and distorting it and teaching it the wrong thing. And that is, you went out there and you learned and you did it on your own and you realized what truth is. You decided to follow the truth, and now she's denying you the opportunity to do that. So that's a sad story. For me, that's a sad story.
But really,
and there's a lot of people out there that's their approach. Mm-hmm. It isn't what I've been teaching for the last 40 years. It can't be right. These people are bad people to teach that the hamstrings extend the knee and not flex the knee. And as you know, probably 95% of what we teach, it's contrary to what you learn in your personal training certification, certainly contrary to what we learn in physical therapy school. It's contrary to what I learned in my athletic training certification, but it's not crap we made up. It's not theoretical. It's 100%. If this is true, that has to be true. If the body moves in 3 planes of motion, then I have to understand how every muscle functions in 3 planes of motion. That's undeniable truth. So that's why you see people doing, as you say, crazy things, going through all 3 planes of motion to create mobility in a joint, to turn on the proprioceptors, to properly functionally activate a muscle to get it to do what it's going to do. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story, and something that as I continue to post, people continue to say, "Show me your studies. Show me your you're going against research," and it's a bit. I don't use the word dangerous. Use a different word. That you're a trainer talking about relieving someone's pain, and
yes,
and we even had a local physical therapy group, and I'm very very honored that they did. They came over here and they had lunch with us. And I got to stand in front of them and describe what we do, all of them, every single one of them. And it's a big physical therapy place, at least in our area, and they're outside of the state too. And it was really awesome because they kind of honed in on one word, at least my takeaway. They honed in on one word. It's like, you mentioned pain a lot. I'm like, yeah, that's in my head, it's like that's a word I can use, right? That's not off my table.
Yeah.
And I guess you guys take care of pain. I said, yeah. I mean, every day we have clients, and they walk out here in less pain or no pain.
You bet.
And it was very interesting because as we're analyzing it for so much time, I kind of realized is that it's like that's a term that I've went to a lot of other certifications, and they're saying once there's pain, you have to transfer your liability, quote unquote. You got to transfer your focus to the medical system. That's the appropriate step to do it. And I followed along that path for many, many years of my career until I started realizing, like, wait a minute. We had literally a completely broken L1 all the way to T10 from a fall accident from a climber. Amazing young girl. Well, she's about my age, but I'll still call her young. I call every female young. But it's like it was that concept. Is like she came in and she says, "I'm in pain. I want to start moving again." And the part that I really want to share is that we never touched her back.
Mm-hmm.
I do not treat surgical sites.
Right.
I do not treat back pain. I don't treat knee pain. But I certainly treat the ankle, the hip, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, cervical spine that isn't in pain, that will affect and therefore, in a lot of cases, vast majority of the cases, take away that pain source. And that's a concept that I want to share. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's a big...
Oh, no. You summarized it beautifully. First of all, if you, as a personal trainer, if you had to, anytime anybody mentioned pain or a subset of pain would be called discomfort or stiffness, we wouldn't see anybody.
Yeah, and that's what they call it.
And there is a threshold that that let's say somebody just came through the door and had a surgery from an acute injury that really needs to kind of have hey, listen, let this really good therapy center take good care of you, but they're not going to be able to hold you forever, and we'd love to continue to work with you later. But the lady that you mentioned is, like you say, you understood the human body. Here's the best way to answer that question or to comment on that. Let's say that lady is your wife. Would you rather her go to you with your understanding of the human body, or would you rather her go to, and I'll probably get beat up on this one, but I still see a lot of student physical therapists who are 1 month away from physical therapy, and if they came in with that high lumbar, low thoracic involvement, and I said, please evaluate this person to tell me what we're going to do. They're not going to look at the subtalar joint like you did. They're not going to look at the ankle like you did. They're not going to understand the importance of getting those hips moving in all 3 planes of motion to take the stress off that area. They're not going to understand that high thoracic area and the scapular mobility. They're not going to understand most stability. So the answer is, man, if that's my wife, Micah Hughes is going to treat her or take care of her, however you want to define that. And yeah, even if she has pain, and even if it is from something what would be called relatively significant, because that therapist who hasn't been trained the way you have, that has been very traditionally trained, who's going to probably give her some back exercises or whatever we're being taught to do anymore, it's just not going to get the job done. So keep going. But I just wanted to interrupt because that's our belief too. We everybody had to their own self be true. You got to understand where your threshold of your abilities and liabilities are. But as you know, the more you've learned about the human body, the more you've been able to, when people come in with pain, you go, you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
Because we know that pain dramatically influences your life. And if I can do some things with you that indirectly take care of the cause, which many times you're doing, and get rid of that pain, not only temporarily, but permanently, then I have done my job as a personal trainer. And that's the job of a personal trainer.
Yeah, and to speak to all the personal trainers in a sense, like we have a partnership of people. We have we have chiropractors, we have physical therapists, we have massage therapists they're in our circle in a sense, not our same businesses, but that we really do our best to say, you know what, that acupuncturist is really going to calm that tissue down a heck of a lot faster than me.
Amen.
Over there, and that chiropractor is going to, because you got a subluxed joint, that just get it back into place, and then let's start going to work. And yeah, you tore your ACL. You know what? You should go see a physical therapist because that sucker needs to be reestablished. But once you need function outside of just standing and going pee, whatever the case is, then you got to come to us. And it's fascinating what happens when people come to your training facility. It's a gym, but I call it a training facility, and they ask you for help. And I usually have the same conversation with them. How many different people have you talked to finally get to me? And I find that a very interesting kind of story, and because we're always the last option, and they're still searching. It's really true. We're always usually the last option, and I usually look at them and I say, you know what, I'm very sorry for what's going on. I hear your story, and it's a crazy story. And it's yours, but I'm not going to treat your lower back. I'm not going to touch your knee. And it's really, they kind of look at me like almost like, okay, I get it, because everyone's worked just on my knee. You know, relatively.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, they're not confused. They intuitively go, well, this makes more sense, because everybody who's isolated, where I say I have my problem, that hasn't worked, and I'm not able to go back to what I want to. And to have somebody smart enough to connect all the dots and ultimately take advantage of all my friends of my knee. And when you take good care of my friends, all of a sudden the knee says, well, thank you. Now I have less stress and less responsibility on me, and now I'm going to be able to contribute to this human body better. I think you experienced this as well, but when our very first gift was in 2007. So as you can imagine, very first gift gathering, we wasn't really sure what was going to happen. Because the gift fellowship knew that we had therapists who'd been therapists for 35 years, some of them world known, sitting next to a personal trainer who took a 6-month personal training course. And they're looking at each other and going, so we're in the same class? Yeah. We're studying the same thing? Yeah. And immediately there was a respectful bond. I mean, it was like a thing of beauty. I didn't anticipate it. I thought we'd have to do a little dancing and romancing to explain to everybody why we thought all movement specialists should be under one roof and should be taught the same thing. But what I quickly realized is that therapists who came through the door and that trainer came through the door, before they came through the door, they left this little stuffed animal that they normally carry in their pocket called an ego at the doorway. And they came in and they immediately had respect for each other and said, so you're gutting this 40-week thing out too, huh? Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't learn this in school, did we? No. Well, I'm proud of you. The personal trainer would say to the therapist, and the therapist would go, no, I'm proud of you. And you experienced the same thing. Everyone in your gift class loved you and respected you and admired you. And you did the same to them. And that's the beauty of people with the same kind of mental drive, but I think it's more of a heart drive and a spiritual drive, who just really say, I don't care how we do it. I just want to get better at taking care of people. Yeah. I don't care, the thresholds and the borders are. I know I'm going to pray about always doing the right thing, but man, if I can help this person in pain, this will bring joy to my life, and that's mostly what we do.
Yeah, and especially for the trainers who have an access to such an ecosystem of, because one-on-one training is a highly focused area, but then it moves to a small group or semi-private, and then to a large group. Like, there's such an amazing way to train the sustainability of human movement in a field that I think other fields just don't have. Physical therapist has to build a whole other business model to do fitness inside of their physical therapy, and chiropractic the same way. Where fitness, there's such a range of potential that it's very unique. It's very unique that we can work on all the way to a team environment and train that specific ankle, and then literally build programming to keep it there in a group environment that costs you $10 a session. It's less than a copay at this particular point.
Yeah, that's why it's getting even more important. By the way, I don't know if you saw an article that was done by a guy in the New York Times, but this has been even years ago, before the copays got like this. But he had I actually believe it was an ankle problem, and he went to like 4 or 5 different services in New York City, and found out that the person who looked at him, to listen to him, that solved this problem was a personal trainer. I think he went to an orthopedic surgeon. He went to a physical therapist. He went to a number of people, and his whole article was, if you find somebody that understands your human body and understands, what you're really after, and can, as we say, put the puzzle pieces together, that's who you want. Just because they have a title of a certain type, or have a certain type of insurance reimbursement doesn't mean a lot. So what the personal trainers need to hear now is that you're becoming even more significant, because what you're charging many times, even with a $60, $70, $80 half-hour session, that's a copay for a lot of physical therapy groups. Now, again, you have to hopefully, if the therapist's been listening to this, or hopefully they're going to listen long enough. I believe we got good people in all professions, and we have what I would call not so good in all professions. So I'm beating up the profession of physical therapy because I know what they still teach.
Right.
I'm not beating up the physical therapists. There's a lot of therapists out there that get through the tunnel and become a doctor of physical therapy, and then they start learning how the human body really works, and they're doing amazing. And they don't have to do it through the Gray Institute. I don't want people to assume that the only way that you're going to learn this stuff is to come our way, because there's a lot of great people out there teaching it. I just believe that unless you can tell me, like you said, what every joint in the body is doing in all 3 planes of motion, when somebody walks, you'll never be able to properly treat low back pain. Because any of those joints, any of those muscles, any of those proprioceptors could be the cause of the low back pain. And if you can't tell me what the right mid-tarsal joint's doing when the right foot's in front, what's happening at the SI joint, I would have to say that, I'm sorry, you're not in an optimal thought process to be able to treat low back pain.
Yeah.
That scares people.
Yeah. And from a different standpoint, because it's true, like my best friend is a physical therapist up in Oakland area. He's a thinker, just flat out. And he's one of the best spinal cord physical therapists in California.
Yeah.
But he thinks. And it's really coming down to it more. Is like, I'm understanding how the insurance world works. And how.
Well, if you figure that out, give me a call.
Well, but it's just talking to a bunch of physical therapy friends of mine, colleagues of mine, understanding that it's not to use the word hamstring again, but they're hamstrung on how they can treat. And that's really interesting when you get to a cash pay world like we're in.
Right.
We can, and I'm going to say this very loosely and almost dramatically on purpose, we can do whatever we want. Obviously, there's ethics behind these things.
Right.
But, and it's amazing what that's doing. And what I really believe is capitalism kind of always wins, for the good and for the bad. And this is a good opportunity. I think this is a good opportunity where people can get their dollar to stretch a lot further, because they don't have to go on that E-stem. They don't have to go on that ultrasound. They don't have to get that ice pack. They don't have to get the 45 minutes with a PT aid and only 15 minutes with the physical therapist, when I can spend
Yep.
100% of the time on movement and not joint mobilization, but joint mobility, stability, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I don't just, it's a very interesting opportunity time that I think in this industry, now with the pandemic's gone through, we realize that we were shunned as non-essential, but we realize how health is the most essential thing in the world, enough to shut down the entire world for health.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, well, who's the front lines of that? I mean, you can call nutrition be the front line, but who's from the movement side? And it's the personal trainer.
Yep.
And it's a
No, I agree.
it's a rally cry. Like, how can we step up and how can we improve the industry?
No, again, what I hopefully you're saying, and I know you are, is let the personal trainers who really understand the human body, let's step up. We're not saying that you take a weekend course and
I wish it was easy.
You know your CPR, you know how to call 911, and you know how to count to 10, and you can know how to put plates on the thing, and but you don't really how to look at movement and go, I think I know what's going on there. But those who do, and that's they're going to find out over the next 2 to 3 years that everything's playing into them. Isn't it sad that insurances are now dictating what I can do as a physical therapist? I mean, that should almost be a comment on what we've done over I should be apologizing for that to all the physical therapists. So for the last 45 years, I haven't proven to an insurance company that I have the professional wherewithal to determine what the patient needs.
Right.
They determine what the patient needs, how long the patient gets therapy, what they get, what they're going to reimburse. Of course, insurance companies will always win. That's why they call them insurance companies. But it's kind of sad that over 45 years, I haven't gained the trust of an insurance company to say, this is what we need to do to help this person to get to ultimately where they want to go. We have horror stories. Yeah, well, you get 6 shots at them, and you're going, you got to be kidding me, and as opposed to, no, why don't you start a lifetime journey with this personal trainer who's going to understand you for your whole life. So there's no time where all of a sudden I can or can't do that. We're always going to do what's best for you, the client. That's the way it should be, but that's not the way it is anymore.
No, well, I think this is, like I said, through understanding biomechanics, and essentially I like to call it as becoming a physicist of movement is what top quality,
That's the best description I've heard.
Yeah, and principle-based thinking. I have a few mentors. You're one of them, whether you know it or not. And Elon Musk, I've never met him, but I really like him because he's a principles-first thinker. He says, what should happen, and is that physically possible or not? If it is, then let's push for it.
Right.
And that's, to me, how the human body works. It's physical. Well, there's a lot to it. There's this thing here and this thing here. And that's really where it happens. You've taught me that very, 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 very well. I have one more question, because I think this is a great story that I've certainly heard it many times, and I'd love to hear it again. But it's a good representation of where you were called in by the Special Forces to unpack their movement, to assess and to build them a program that literally got them ready for anything. And that's how I look at our job. My job, there's no seasons outside. I'm in a studio right now, and literally training is going on outside these walls. You probably even heard the music playing. Is that there's no seasons out there with those clients. They are working 24/7, nonstop. They don't have an off-season, a game season. They don't have an athletic trainer in a sense. Well, that's not true. They don't really have the access in certain times of their lives to get what they need. Just like these special forces, when they're out there, they're out there. And we have to understand everything that they do. And to me, that's a great story of it, and maybe a closing story of what you did to us to learn and get enough information to send these soldiers, hopefully, in a brand new path. So,
well, I've never thought about that, but I love your analogy because what we encountered with having the privilege of working with our special forces group, and we work with the SEALs and the Rangers and one other group that you just used as analogy is your typical client is the same thing. they got to be ready for everything all day. There's not a season. There's not a day off. There's not, hey, I'm going to play the game tomorrow and then I get to take a day or two off, or hey, we're going to have 3 months off during the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's go time all the time.
All the time.
And
different intensity level.
What's that?
Just at different intensity levels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes the intensity level of the average human is even more. I mean, it's, when you think of what everybody has to deal with, is like, wow, So when, as you know the story, I'll abbreviate it so we don't carry on too long. But for us, it was a privilege because they first of all asked us to come down to evaluate what they were doing as far as their training, because at that point, their biggest problem was getting these gentlemen redeployed. And the number one reason they couldn't be redeployed is because lingering musculoskeletal injuries. Wasn't being shot, wasn't, what we would call battle stuff. It was the typical neuromusculoskeletal problems that they weren't able to go back and come stateside and then get properly rehabbed, so to speak, and get back and to do what they need to do in different countries, so to speak. So I didn't know much about. I never had the privilege of being in the military. I watched movies and it's some kind of idea. But when I went down there and they let me see some of their training. You're not allowed to see a lot of the stuff just because of the confidentiality, and also just because it's very protected. It didn't surprise me. I saw some really typical traditional things: a lot of push-ups, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of running. And I said to the gentleman that I was dealing with, I said, I don't want to seem ignorant here, but I'm ignorant. I don't know everything a SEAL does. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I don't know everything they do. And the guy goes, well, they do everything. I go, yeah, but I don't know what that is. I don't know what it feels like to, jump out of a plane and land with a parachute on. I don't know what it feels like to, haul a chainsaw into an area and try to use it to open up an area to excavate to get to the enemy, so to speak. I don't know what it feels like to be out on the field and being shot at. I don't know what it feels like to, be in water and covertly try to sneak up beside a ship and, put a bomb on a ship. I said, I don't know any of that stuff. And he goes, well, yeah, it's because you haven't been a SEAL. And I go, I know that. I said, but here's what I'd like to propose. I said, where I come from, a lot of the factories let me come in and share with them what I would do to take care of my body. And I said, I don't believe the way I was taught in the books. The books taught this body mechanics stuff that's contrived and, this artificial stuff that makes no sense to anybody in the factory. If you've ever gone there and gave them one of those traditional talks, they'd laugh you out of the place. So what I do is I get a hold of the CEO of the factory, of the company, and go, I need to work for free for 3 days in your facility, and then I will be more willing to get in front of your people and say, if I had that job, here's what I would do to beat up my body less and be able to go home and still play with the kids. 100% of the time they said, great, are you kidding? This is wonderful. And my credibility level went up because I quickly realized how hard it is to work in that factory, how dedicated these people are to their families, what they do day after day in order to just put food on the table. And first of all, I usually go there and go, you guys are my heroes. And I said, so that's what I need to do. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I need to be a SEAL. Well, I had to pick him off the ground because he was laughing so hard. I mean, literally, this guy, I'm thinking, what's so funny? And he goes, well, first of all, have you seen yourself? And I go, yeah, I try not to look in the mirror, but yeah, I've seen myself. He goes, yeah, I'm sorry. And he goes, I'm high in the Navy. He says, I couldn't even train with the SEALs. Unless you're a SEAL, you don't train with the SEAls. He goes, let me see if I can put this in perspective. You like basketball? Yeah. He says, let's say, the Lakers are running their triangular offense, and it's the day before Game 7 of the NBA championship. And you go, you know what? I'd like to go to practice. I'd like to get part of the triangle here, and I want to learn when I should pick up, when I should pick over, when I should actually give and go, when I should set, do this. And they go, and I go, well, they'd never let you do that. They'd screw everything up. He goes, precisely. He says, but the only thing you're going to screw up is they're going to miss a layup. You become a SEAL, you're going to get somebody killed. I go, oh. Okay, that's a little different than I had in my brain. And he goes, so what's your proposal? I said, I can't. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. What I may be able to do to help these gentlemen, because I don't know what they do, and I only have a pinch knowledge of how they train. So my gut instinct is there's a gap between their training and what they really do, and because I see that in all sports. And he goes, well, how do you want to resolve that? And I go, well, maybe you have some movie or some film you can show me. He goes, no, we can't even allow you to see that. And I go, well, I'm sorry. I said, I don't know what to do. I said, look, why don't I go back home and give me, a couple days to think about it. But I know what we've already talked about, but ideally me coming and being a SEAL for a little while would really be, so he laughed again. He goes, well, that's never going to happen. And as you know, the rest of the story is I got home a couple days later, he calls me up and he says, we have approval from the Admiral. And he goes, I have no idea why, but you get to be a SEAL for a week. And at that point I go, well, that's the stupidest thing I might have ever thought of in my life, And he goes, you have to be proficient with the 9mm, M16, all things that, at least I had friends that he says, so when you show up here, we can't waste time, so you don't shoot yourself in the toe, or worse than that, shoot somebody else. And so the whole idea of that week's story we'll see for another time, but that's a book in itself, because the start of the book was respect, the end of the book was respect, and the middle of the book is every day we should be down on our hands and knees thanking our military, everybody, for what they're doing to keep us safe. That's the book.
Yeah.
That's what I learned, and that's what it's amazing. But here's what your point was, is that we had to, when we found out what they did, we had to figure out a way that we could train them and be a specialist of all their specialties. And the problem is they have a lot of specialties, like more than I ever dreamed, and more difficult than I ever dreamed. And so we had to come up with what we called a lot of common denominator foundational movements to allow them to then build from there based on what time they had and what their goals were and what knick-knack injuries they had and what musculoskeletal problems they were dealing with. And as you know, we were extremely successful in that, even to the point where a couple of years later, the what I would call the SEAL that we dealt with mostly shared with a group of chain reaction participants that within 1 year, we reduced the musculoskeletal injuries up to 90%. And the redeployment rate was like unbelievable because they were training different. They just weren't doing 1,000 push-ups from an XXX position. And so, the drill there. So that was a huge blessing to us, because we were forced to think, okay, if we can come up with a common denominator assessment and training and mobility and strength program that literally attacks every joint and every plane of motion, and turns on every proprioceptor and engages every muscle, and we're able to do this with the least amount of movements, and then build from there, we're going to be very successful. And of course, that was that's when the whole idea of 3D maps started firming up, the 6 movements of 3D maps. So it was
our warm-up, by the way.
Yeah,
yeah, a lot of
exactly.
Warm-ups.
And it was strangely enough, it was the first thing, even before 3D maps, when you saw Lisa do the spherical matrix, that was that. I mean, literally, she was lunging and moving in all 3 planes of motion and driving her hands in all 3 planes of motion, and all of a sudden you're going, what's that? Well, the answer is those simple 6 movements lengthen, create mobility in every joint in the body to their threshold, which is the goal, and create the need for strength to control it in all those joints and turn on every proprioceptor, and therefore engage every muscle you have in your body with 6 movements. Well, that's like, we would have thought, even when you took GIF, we said that was impossible, because everything was just pure specialty trained.
Yeah, you said it's not there. We just can't figure it out.
Yeah, we said, I got in front of everybody and said, I don't think it can be done.
Yeah.
This a global human movement analysis and training program. Now, remember, I kept preaching, you got to know the transformational zone of the specialty, of the context dependent. Well, I was wrong again, and that's probably, if I had to write a book of my life, I've been wrong a lot. But I think I was blessed as a kid to know how dumb I was and to realize that being wrong is going to be my game.
Yeah.
And as long as I take advantage of the game and go, okay, now that I'm wrong, what would be better? What theoretically is more right? And so that's kind of what I've tried to do my entire life. So, and that's kind of the foundation of what we do in AFS is understanding how you then tweak those fundamental movements to make them more specialist-like for that specialty that the person wants. And it becomes a beautiful package, like you say, a very logical, simple package, but you got to go through the complexity, as we say, the valley of complexity to get to the mountaintop of simplicity. And you guys, I believe, are just doing an amazing job of taking advantage of the mountain of simplicity and basically sharing the truths in a way that people understand them quite effectively and instantaneously can empower their clients. And I think that's why you guys have been so successful, and that's why you're going to be hugely successful over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm excited for you.
I appreciate that. Well, to me, this is a perfect full circle moment because it was that crazy funky girl named Lisa doing these crazy funky moves, and which now have become a staple of every single program that we do, and is now actually, if you think of a trainer out there who says, I get to train a Navy SEAL, like, I mean, how, you can't get better than that. It's just like that. I mean, it seems to be an egocentric, just I got a trophy on the wall type of clientele. You know, instead of the trophy fish, it's the trophy client. It doesn't get better than
No.
And then realize that what she was doing in that big box gym was no different, literally no different than what a few teams or a few different camps or bases are doing in their warm-ups. I know not everyone does it, but I know it's, you can only influence who you can influence. They're doing. And that's all under the training and conditioning world.
Yep, that kind of covers it.
Yeah,
we of course teach that within our free-to-play program, and a young lady she went up to a basketball game up in Detroit and saw this particular athlete do his warm-up, and he did a spherical matrix warm-up, basically a full 3D maps warm-up. First of all, free flow, and then with a little bit of weight, and then while he was dribbling the basketball. And she realized that she had just done that herself, and she went back to her school, and her teacher, who basically allowed them to do the free-to-play matrices every day, it takes 5 or 6 minutes. She went to her teacher. She says, here's what I saw. And then she thought for a bit, and she goes, am I just like a professional athlete? And her teacher brilliantly says, I think you're even better than that.
I just got tingles, Gary.
Yes, certainly you're as important, you know, and I think it's about time we teach our clients and we teach our kids and we teach us older people that we have as much significance as importance as anybody else, and that our goal is to show the same respect to a multi-billion-dollar athlete and a SEAL who's worth even more than multi-billion dollars, and the same respect to our family members and our friends, and the same respect for that dear person who comes into that facility the first time and said, man, I'm looking for somebody to personally train me and to empower me to let me love life even more.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the smile on your face and go, you be in the right spot.
I dig it. Well, right on. Well, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate the story time. I really appreciate connecting with you. Thank you for sharing your perspective to an industry that I really obviously care about a whole lot, and who directly I influence, and you directly influence through me as well, and as through everything that you guys do. So thank you.
Well, it's always a blessing to see you have this charming smile, but as significant as your charming smile, I literally have the ability to see your heart smile. And so I appreciate your heart and spirit and what you've meant to me, and you have truly become the mentoree that has transformed into my mentor. So I appreciate what you've contributed to my life and our Gray Institute family's life. So all I can do is just pray that you continue to get blessed, just as you continue to bless so many people. So thank you for this opportunity, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Right back at you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.